you don't realize the X-Men are minorities and they're allowed to fight back and all this kind of stuff, which has been the party line for quite some time. This week, Chris Claremont decided to burst everyone's bubble since he is the master of the X-Men. He's the one that made them into an A-list property and talked about what they really represent. And I thought this was very interesting, Doc. I know you and I have had these discussions before, and everyone gets very, very upset if you implicate that they're anything other than just an allegory for minorities.
It has kept going further and further and further in that direction for most of the last 15 to 20 years. And that has also been, coincidentally, the decline of the X-Men as a franchise, because they just becoming allegorical for smaller and smaller and smaller minorities. First, it was any minorities, and in the last few years, it's been the Libidiqua Mafia allegory. Near the end of the Krakoa era, it was basically just trans allegory. That was all they ever used it for. And you wonder why your product no longer appeals to a large swath of people.
Not surprisingly, the comic book media were not very happy with what Claremont said, because they did have to preface before quoting him, stating, "It's not easy being a mutant in the Marvel Universe. While superheroes like Captain America and Thor are celebrated and adored, the public has made mutant heroes like Cyclops and Nightcrawler into pariahs. Since their debut in 1963, the X-Men have been persecuted by society. Multiple storylines involve the team being hunted and imprisoned by government officials. Readers and scholars have compared the mutant experience to the civil rights movement, noting that the X-Men face the same type of persecutions as minorities, and that's basically the only thing they've been able to be for quite some time, but that certainly wasn't what they started out as."
No, absolutely not. It was basically for anyone that felt like an outcast. You can always feel left out or pushed out or like you don't fit in. And that was the beauty of the X-Men as a franchise. As you start to make it more and more and more, not only topical, but allegorical, instead of being welcoming to anyone that feels left out, you're now basically forcing people out. You are forcing people to be like, well, you're not part of this smaller and smaller and ever tightening minority group that it's allegorical for. No one is welcome unless you are like this.
And the worst part about it, it restricts the storytelling that you're allowed to do when you pigeonhole the characters into such a tight box like that.
The X-Men used to be kind of a everything in the kitchen sink franchise. When you keep tightening it, all you can do is keep telling the exact same story over and over, and there's only so many ways to tell the I'm oppressed story without it feeling like you're just browbeating people. You lose interest because no one wants to keep reading the exact same story.
However, longtime X-Men writer Chris Claremont says that it's more nuanced than that. In fact, he doesn't agree with the X-Men being labeled as minorities. During a panel at CCXP 2024, the legendary X-Men writer spoke about relationships mutants have with society, stating, "The challenge is to see themselves at the school as minorities. That's Charlie's job. That's Magneto's job. From my perception, what they are is a half dozen, maybe a dozen kids, young people living together, but looking on themselves as ordinary people." And you can see why Chris Claremont was wildly, wildly successful with the X-Men. These are really cool teenage characters with really awesome abilities, going out there and fighting, unimaginable stakes at every turn, and they're always like a weird, cohesive team that also kind of fights with each other and stuff like that. But all that stuff has been washed aside.
You have Charlie and you have Magneto that are kind of looking at them as almost tools in their ideological battle between each other and with society. Whereas the people that are living that kind of outsider life day to day, all they want to do is try to live a normal life like everyone else. They don't want to be oppressed. They don't want to be the victim. They want to try to triumph over that. That victim mentality is not, well, first of all, it's not fucking healthy. I mean, we see this throughout actual society, but especially in the comics, it is not healthy and it's not a fun read. At the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. These are a sellable product that needs to be enjoyable to read. And if all you're doing is reading woe is me bullshit all day, every day, you are not going to have fun and you are not going to want to keep coming back. It's not only joyless, but it's downright fucking depressing. people don't want just misery porn all the time.
Yeah, I can't take another Jean Grey or Kitty Pryde like dressing down of the UN. How many of those fucking speeches have we gotten over the years? It's just fucking boring, and it basically cuts out the action and the stakes and having fun and maybe going off to space and finding something else somewhere else to go out there and fight. And all those things have been kind of removed. And, I thought really X-Men hit rock bottom with, this is mustard and bigotry, which is something Nightcrawler would never say. That's not part of who the character that he is. But it feels like every year or two, we just go down a notch. We got to the fall of X during the end of the Krakoan era, when it was just absolutely worse. And now that we're into the initial stages of From the Ashes, it actually hasn't gotten better, which is kind of what Brevoort promised, but he's just doing the same problem.
Most of Krakoa, and definitely the last half of Krakoa, has been nothing but self-insert power fantasy. There's always been the talk that, both pro wrestling and comic books, especially superhero comics, are adolescent male power fantasy. This is not even adolescent. This is childish revenge fantasy on everything that you think has harmed you or doesn't like you. The X-Men running around and fighting villains in space was a way for them to show that, hey, we're just like the Avengers. We're just like the Fantastic Four. X-Men have now become the thing that they were fighting to prevent themselves from being, which is just always dealing with whatever social bullshit is out there, instead of changing the hearts and minds of people. Instead, now it's just, I am going to force you into it. That's the fucking Brotherhood.
And it's crazy. I made this video this week talking about how people should fear and hate mutants with the way that they're acting within the X-Men series itself. We had Cyclops basically threatening not only to destroy the United States of America, the government, destroying an entire city, using Juggernaut, basically equating him to a weapon of mass destruction, like a nuclear weapon. Zorn was another threat that he put out there. And then he threatened to destroy the entire Earth. That is not the way of the X-Men. That is the way of the Brotherhood of Mutants, as you mentioned here. And everyone is sitting there online trying to argue with me like, oh no, but it's their time. They've been oppressed for so long. It's like, this is fucking comic books. These are superheroes. These aren't idiot, unmoralistic morons like you on the street. These are people that are supposed to rise above. We are supposed to be better, kind of like the X-Men. The X-Men aren't supposed to be worse like us.
I understand why people that are in the real world, like, have been oppressed for decades or whatever, taking to forms of terrorism and violence and everything for social change. I don't agree with it. I understand why they do it, because they feel that they don't have another option, but they do. And that's the whole point of the X-Men, to show that you don't have to do that to affect the social change you want. They've made progress with their approach. You know where they've made it worse? When they've decided to become segregationist supremacists, whenever they decide that they're going to start using the Brotherhood's fucking tactics. That is the tactics of the Brotherhood, not the X-Men. All these people that are suddenly connecting with that approach, they're evil people. I don't care whether they want to scream about how empathetic they are or call us genocidal bigots because we just say, hey, don't commit terror to get the social outcome that you would like, because it's not going to work, and all you're going to do is breed more contempt.
Chris Claremont provided an excellent example, being Nightcrawler, stating Nightcrawler is the most dynamic, non-human physicality in the team, but his attitude is, I am the person God made. Who am I to argue with God? I'm just going to live my life like a normal guy and see what happens next. Yes, he used to hide the way he looked because he's not stupid. Blue skin, 2 fingers, 2 toes, and a tail definitely make you stand out in the crowd. It took Logan to challenge him to take off the mask and be a normal person and see if anybody else notices to get him to do it. But other than that, he just tried to live a normal, cool life as someone who loves acting, who is a theater performer, and who is a stuntman. And that's how you get to the heart of the characters. That's how you get awesome character moments. That's how you get people to buy into the characters. And that's when you raise the stakes. You're bought into the character is in jeopardy, and now you're involved in it. But because he can't even be Nightcrawler anymore, we can't even really be Catholic anymore. He's got to have his own mutant religion and stuff like that. it removes and puts up an enormous barrier between the character and the reader.
We can look at this week's issue of X-Men and see how Cyclops behaved. We saw this character progression in the past with him. Slowly got worse and worse. He became basically Magneto, and then he died and he came back. He realized, hey, I've gotten so far away from what I actually wanted under the influence of Emma and Magneto for the last few years. He even disagreed with Xavier's approach.
What was the reaction when Scott did that? Everyone said, what the hell is going on here? That is not Scott. That is somebody masquerading as Scott. And in fact, it was the writer himself.
Exactly. It was Kieran Gillen and then Brian Bendis. You know what? For all the crap we give Matthew Rosenberg, he tried to bring Scott back to being fairly normal. And even during the Krakoan era, where everyone else was acting so wildly out of character, Scott was acting kind of like traditional Scott. He was disagreeing with Xavier. He was disagreeing with Magneto. He's like, no, you've gotten away from your own dream. We need to have the X-Men. Now, granted, building a fucking treehouse was kind of goofy and stupid, but for the most part, he acted like himself. And even when everybody else was deciding to become fucking murder bots, he was not. And now what? They just decide to bring him back to the worst era of the Kieran Gillen, him running his own extinction team that was made up of nothing but villains anyway. They're just using them as a tool to make whatever social point they feel like making.
And I think that's exactly what Claremont was getting to, is like, once you only look at them from one lens and you don't realize they're people that have history, that have family history, not only with the X-Men, with where they were raised, cultural history and all that kind of stuff, that informs the character and the decision and the path that they're going to walk down and the way that they're going to interact with each other. Once you remove all of that and make it such a narrow lens, you lose the character within the story as you write that. And we've almost lost essentially every X-Men out there. As I mentioned, Nightcrawler, not really Catholic anymore, made up his own religion. Cyclops, now a psycho. Charles Xavier, serial killing psycho. Magneto, for some reason, the fucking good guy. I don't understand what's going on here. And now Storm can't be herself. She has to be like this fucking faux pseudo goddess now because she's the most famous black female X-Men. And in order to elevate her, we can't treat her like Storm, which is what got her over in the first place. We have to treat her like something that she gave up a long time ago.
Same with Jean. I mean, the only thing that she can be now is the fucking Phoenix that goes around the universe scolding people. All of these characters are so out of character that it's not even fun to read them anymore. And we wonder why nobody's buying the goddamn comics. I understand that you want to make a point periodically with these characters. They do. That's the beauty of the X-Men. They have the ability to be used to make social points the way that maybe the Fantastic Four or the Avengers are unable to within the Marvel Universe. The problem is you made that their only sole purpose. When all you're getting is the message TM over and over and over, it might as well just be a looping propaganda channel that you're expecting people to pay $5 a month for multiple times because you got 12 goddamn books being published.
Marvel still has an exclusive with Chris Claremont. He can't write for anybody else. He doesn't really do much. He does maybe 5 issues in a year. Maybe he'll do a couple more if he gets multiple miniseries. They should just make him the X-Men fucking consultant. You don't have to be the group editor. You don't have to do all that work. But we are going to run by you our major storylines, make sure that they fit the characters, make sure that it works for what we're doing here, and actually make the team correct again. But they're even wasting the best X-Men resource that they have because I guess Jordan White and Tom Brevoort wouldn't want somebody overseeing and making sure that they were doing their job right.
Tom Brevoort, before he became the weirdo that he's become in the last few years, he was just Marvel's continuity cop, and he was actually pretty good at that. Apparently, he's decided that he doesn't want to do that anymore, and that continuity is, oppression or something. He should be the one that's telling them, no, you can't do that because it violates all of this canon and all of this personality of the characters. But you know what? Fuck it. None of that stuff apparently matters to Marvel Comics anymore. They just do whatever they want, including the guy that used to tell them, no, you can't do that. Yeah, Chris should be the one saying no, because he could probably keep the characterization in line. Maybe he could actually teach people who these characters are supposed to be. It's very, very clear that almost none of the writers in this office actually know the X-Men, which is weird because they're all supposed to be the quote-unquote young up-and-coming writers, except for the fact that they're all older than you and I.
If there's an authoritative voice when it comes to the X-Men, it is Chris Claremont. He set the record straight, and I do appreciate that, for pointing out that you have to let these characters breathe and be fully functional. TCM Press is bringing you Megacon 2025 exclusives that you don't want to miss. We've got Silent Nights by Jamie Tyndall, Depths of Valor by John Jiang, and Unholy Nightmare by Vu Dan. These incredible titles will be available in regular, foil, and metal covers, but only in very limited quantities. Mark your calendars. They drop February 3rd from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at thecomicmint.com. If you missed the online release, don't fret. The remaining stock will be available at Megacon 2025. And while you're there, stop by the Comic Mint and TCM Press booth number 3038 to meet Dolan, aka Drew, Stephen Finkel, and Murphy herself, and get your copies signed. Don't wait long. When they're gone, they're gone. See you at Megacon 2025.